G'day guys, I know it's been a couple of days since I've talked to you about Ukraine, but I've just been super busy, and what's really going on, realistically, not that much at the moment. And we've spoken about this lull, and we've been in this lull for a long time. We're going to speak about what this is, why there's this period of, I guess, reduced tempo somewhat that we're seeing, but we're going to talk about some news, we're going to look at some maps and sort of go back to the old way of we do some stuff. But I also like doing some of those more long sort of investigative videos as well. What's on everyone's mind is, where is the offensive? When is it coming? What's it going to look like? And there's so much speculation around this. Now, is this delay to continue preparing the Ukrainian troops and the newly delivered vehicles in staging areas and then push on to then the large-scale offensive? Is it being done on purpose to introduce what I would call weight fatigue upon the Russian lines of defence, with just this continually waiting for it, being on edge and then getting fatigued from that, or letting your drills get sloppy, things like that, especially after all the news outlets, all the officials, whatever, that is continually what they're pushing is counteroffensive. But the one thing is, these delays are giving Russia more time to continue development of the defensive positions, arming the necessary units and rearming units that may have been thinned out over this war. To the point now, and I spoke about, if you haven't seen my last video, you should watch it, about asymmetric warfare, that will there be a major offensive like we are, waiting to see? Will that happen, or will it be a more asymmetrical warfare, smaller groups doing things and then being bolstered by larger sources of equipment? Will it be more of that, or is there something else happening entirely? And we just don't know, but we do know for months, many weeks, months, we've been waiting for this, and this has to happen at some point. I was talking to a guy today who was like, Ukraine's most important thing, whether territory, whatever, is support from the people in the West who democratically elect governments who then support Ukraine. Ukraine has the majority of support, but with very little happening, with no offensives we're seeing at the moment, that support could diminish. Therefore, that could then have an effect on the frontline movements, how much equipment is going in, elections, things like this. So I think it's important that we do start seeing things move soon, but no one knows what is happening. When I'm not out in the field, I'm searching through articles and news online, lots of information on topics I not only need to talk about, but then also can affect me privately and things I just want to know. Well, Ground News combines stories and articles from thousands of outlets, both local and international, in one place so readers can see the full picture of what's being reported around the globe. They shine a light on media biases and then hold the media accountable in a landscape where it's becoming absolutely impossible to consult just one news resource for the full picture. With today's video sponsor, Ground News, it helps me more easily see where and what I'm reading and how this is being affected by big media. And let's have a look at this article on Medvedev saying UK officials are legitimate military targets. In Ground News, you can see that 27 sources are reporting on it and 48 lean right, making this story a potential blind spot for left-wing media consumers and readers. It's also interesting to compare headlines to really get a full picture on how the media is framing the story by their word choices. Ground News also shows the factuality of the source and who owns that entity. I also love that Ground News goes out of their way to show stories that are being underreported by both sides on their blind spot feed. Once you read the news this way, it will be impossible to go back. And this is accessible anywhere you are, at home, on your desktop or laptop, or on the go via the app. I believe in having a well-rounded view of the world and what's going on around us, and finding common ground in the hard facts. Make your news less confusing, more factual with today's video sponsor, Ground News. Sign up for free or subscribe through my link, ground.news/IAM, before June 15, and you'll receive 30% off unlimited access if you support the mission and find it as useful as I do. But again, overnight, Russia has launched drone and missile attacks against Ukraine in many regions. And we know that Ukraine's air defense is engaging many, but there are still many that are slipping through. No air defense is 100%. Now, I would argue that we're seeing another stage of attritional warfare. In Bakhmut, the attrition was men, and now the attrition is air defense versus missiles, and who will run out first. So the UK MOD has talked about these missile strikes further. Since the start of May 23, Russia has increasingly ceded the initiative in the conflict and is reacting to Ukrainian action rather than actively progressing towards its own war aims. But in any large-scale war, you have period of defensive, period of offensive. It fluctuates to and from. During May 23, Russia launched 20 nights of one-way attack uncrewed aerial vehicle, drones, and cruise missile attacks deep inside Ukraine. Russia has had little success in its likely aims of neutralising Ukraine's improved air defences and destroying Ukrainian counter-attack forces. On the ground, it has redeployed security forces to react to partisan attacks inside Western Russia, which we've talked about in Belgorod. Now, has it had success taking out some of these systems? We are unsure. We know that some are getting through, some are hitting targets. We know that the GUR, being one of two security forces, well, intelligence services, I should say, inside Ukraine, was struck. Was it destroyed? No, but it was struck. It did come through. That nothing is 100%. And if it was 100%, President Zelensky would not be asking for more of the Patriot air defense systems. But we do know that in this, it's saying success against the defence systems and taking them out. I believe that is one of the goals, but I believe the other goal too is then to wear down these forces. I think it would be easier for Russia to run Ukraine out of missiles by using cheaper drones, things like this, than to actually take out a Patriot system. And I believe that may be where they're going with this. As we've spoken about, the attritional warfare was to do with men. Now it could be to do with equipment. Okay, we'll continue. Operationally, Russian commanders are likely attempting to generate reserve forces and position them where they believe a Ukrainian counterattack will occur. However, this has probably been undermined by uncommitted forces instead of being sent to fill gaps in the front line around Bakhmut. We haven't seen any real territorial changes in around Bakhmut with this, but we do know that Russia is building up its reserves to put down where they think that these counter-offensives will come from, and building up those 5, 6, 7 layers of defence to make it harder to manoeuvre around and make it harder to push straight down through. Well, we see with the offensives, no one knows. And I'm anywhere from clearing all the territory to the offensives were a ploy to make partisan groups and arm Ukraine further for the wear down of Russian forces. And we spoke about this in the last video. Is they could just make it that the cost for Russia is not worth it. You can win a war being defensive only. So let's have a look at the maps as always. And of course we have Ukraine in the centre, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 22, purple since 14, and green areas liberated since the beginning of the 22 invasion. And we're just going to go up and down and have a look and see what we have seen change, if anything, because I just haven't looked at this in a couple of days. And as always, Thursday, Friday, we don't get a map update from Deep State, and the other maps, for some reason, you can't scroll through previous maps, but we're going to go with it. So around the Seversk region, we have seen very little, maybe just some little movements in around Belgorod, but nothing too major, just some map corrections or some small movements in around this area. Now, there is nothing being shown in around the Kupiansk front line, but I do know from a friend who said they did attempt to clear some positions, got their ass kicked, but then they re-rolled back in with engineers who had to clear the minefield of where they got stuck and engaged, and that was cleared, and trenches taken up positions. But the map doesn't show that. Now, Bakhmut, and we talk Bakhmut. Now, Prigozhin has said that 99% of the Wagner troops have withdrawn from Bakhmut, but some of the roads exiting have been mined as well, and again, Prigozhin playing this game of calling out the Russian Federation and the leadership and this to and from of why was that done, you guys did it. And Prigozhin plays many games, he's going after it, but let's have a look at what we've seen shift here. So in the north, I've just seen some of the controlled territory by the Ukrainians more, and then we did see between the 28th and 29th some small ground in the centre of Bakhmut, well, I should say to the west of Bakhmut, was taken by the Ukrainian forces, and we will see as well on the south there are some small movements around. So this is just the front line finding itself. But what I will say in this is there has been an exchange of troops. So some of this that is falling back could just be different defensive positions taken up, as you need to take up the best defensive positions that you can be in defence there. So we will see those small movements across the front line. Now, what about Avdiivka? What have we actually seen? Only on the past 24 hours, what we have seen is Ukraine gained some amount of territory to the north of Opotny here, and we do know that Russia claimed a lot more territory in here, but I don't have any up-to-date Rybar maps. Over the past 48, maybe 72 hours, we did see more area taken here by the Russians near Kamyanka in here. Now, we do know that Kamyanka did come under Russian control, and many people said that it didn't around the time where Bakhmut fell, maybe 24, 48 hours around then. It was when Kamyanka came under full control, but we have seen then Russia gain more area around there. And Avdiivka isn't talked about as much as Bakhmut was, but this area is absolutely a cauldron and is in bad shape in here, but isn't being released that much. Now, we will go down into Mariinka and have a look. Now, Mariinka isn't showing any updates for many weeks, but there are many people saying that there are clearing operations for the remainder of Mariinka going on currently. So this is a map from the Chechens, and this is from the Chechen forces in here as well, saying that they are clearing through here. And let's just compare this to what we're seeing on the deep state. So we're just going to zoom in a little bit so we can make out some of the roads. We have this main road. This is this main road through here and tees off here. And it is showing fairly similar, but saying that they're clearing the remainder, I don't know. It could be a bit of a stretch because it's taken months and months and months to get to this position and moving it forward from there. But Warmapper has said too that Russian forces did move further to the east and the north in Mariinka, and as we can see here, of the grey zone has increased in these regions more so than it actually does show on the deep state. So we're looking at some of these roads down in here, which is symbolised in here, so it should be more around here. So let's have a look at that on the ISW, and this is Mariinka in this region here, and let's compare it to the Warmapper. And it is showing fairly similar, although maybe some more just in this northern region of controlled territory through here, as it's saying, through, say, 3 or 4 blocks up, so around in here in the east, and maybe some more on the north as well. But overall, fairly similar. And we see that with Bakhmut as well. If we go back up to Bakhmut, that there is no major differences between, if I can even work out my map, between Bakhmut on the ISW and Bakhmut on the deep state, that they are fairly similar, and the front line in there is looking to be fairly stable, although people will say that it isn't, that they're going to be surrounded, taken back in this region. From what we're seeing, movements, it's just not happening, and that includes on the south and the north. And I did have a contact originally who said to me that the offensives were launching into this area to do that and were repelled in the north and the south. So not good news there for Ukraine, but we do know that Ukrainian forces are, putting in large numbers in Zaporizhzhia here, and people are talking about where then the offensives will come in the south, as most people will say that the offensive is going to push down to the south here somewhere, either down to Melitopol or Primorsk, Bryansk in this, to cut off the supply that Russia currently has by land straight from the Russian Federation through Luhansk, Donetsk, through the south and into Crimea, and to support the areas on the Kherson south side of the Dnipro here. So they're saying that they are going to V down and cut this off, but as well, this is where we see the most amount of defensive works. So will there be a degree where Ukraine can overwhelm those, manoeuvre warfare, push through in some sort of blitzkrieg manner? We don't know. What will happen from there? Again, we're not really sure. Now, let's talk about this down here, now near Bryansk, and if we zoom out, I'll show you exactly where this is. So down in here, one of the regions we were talking about of where that V could push down, we have seen a strike said from a Storm Shadow missile. So this strike here, and this is in the port region here, said to be a Storm Shadow in there. Russia said they intercepted it, and we can see that clearly this was not well intercepted by maybe the target, but like this with all of this air defence, Russia and Ukraine will say that they have intercepted things, and then there will be video where they haven't really intercepted it from there. But we know air defence has been very reliable in both Ukraine and Russia as well. Now, we have another dot on the map here in Russian territory from Belgorod. Now, this is said to be, this video has been geolocated to here, said to be Ukrainian shelling upon a building here. This is said to be a civilian building, is being reported, and shelling has lit this on fire. But many people are saying this is an official building, judging from the amount of Russian flags out the front. So what exactly is it? I don't know, but there is a definite increase in the shelling and partisan actions across the border in Russia. Now, the increase in this is being, felt through the Western officials as well. So the Freedom of Russian Legion have again crossed into Russian territory, as we're talking about, and many are asking what the point of these operations actually is, because it doesn't seem super clear why you actually just do it going in and out. You're not really getting any ground. You're doing in photo ops and leaving. And many have speculated, is it worth it? Is it suicide missions? Is it just social media? Whatever. Well, one of my contacts is telling me that these are just to draw attention away from other reconnaissance groups pushing deeper into Russian lines and then rendezvousing with partisan groups that we have seen working more and more in the region, and that this is basically just a guise as these Russian Legion groups move in, the ones that are public, they need to make themselves as public as possible while these groups move further in for more partisan actions that we have seen happening now. The UK MOD have released a bit on this as well. So from the morning of the 1st of June, partisan groups attacked Russia's Belgorod region for a second time in 10 days in a complex battlefield situation. What appeared to be an uncrewed aerial vehicles also struck Belgorod city. Uncrewed aerial vehicles, for some reason the MOD UK keeps saying this, just call it a drone. But 35 kilometres inside Russia, while the authorities evacuated civilians from the border town of Shibyanko following Ukrainian shelling. So this dot we've got here that we just talked about is this Shibyanko area here, or from Ukrainian shelling from the UK MOD. The Russian military and interior forces have likely seen quicker success in containing this raid than the previous one. However, according to Russia's MOD own press release, it has resorted to deploying a full range of military firepower on its own territory, including attack helicopters and the TOS-1 Alpha heavy thermobaric rocket launcher, which is a very scary weapon system. Russian commanders now face an acute dilemma of whether to strengthen defences in Russia's border regions or reinforce their lines in occupied Ukraine. So one of the other reasons for these attacks into the Russian territory is to draw forces away from other regions. Like it's saying here, they've had to resort to a full range of military firepower. Choppers, these thermobaric weapons, these are needed on other areas of the front line, as well as troops. And if Russia has to move them away from somewhere along here to that region for then Ukraine to start its offensive on maybe weakened positions because they don't have the actual manning, that could absolutely be a tactic on exactly what is going on there. It is worth noting that Western officials have had mixed reactions to these strikes and crossings into Ukrainian territory. German government spokesman Stefan Herbstred has said on Wednesday, international law allows Ukraine to carry out strikes on the territory of Russia for the purpose of self-defense. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby has told CNN the Biden administration has been clear privately and publicly with the Ukrainians that we don't support attacks on Russian soil. The UK Foreign Secretary James Cleverly has said Ukraine not only has the right to defend itself within its soil, but it also has the right to project force beyond its borders to undermine Russia's ability to project force into Ukraine itself. Deputy Chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Medvedev, has taken to Twitter to say this against what the British said. So we have his tweet here. And he has in the beginning what we talked about, that Ukraine has legitimate right to project force beyond its borders from the UK's Secretary of Defence. And in the end, we'll just have this. Today, the UK acts as Ukraine's ally, providing it military aid in the form of equipment specialists. De facto is leading an undeclared war against Russia. That being the case, any of its public officials, either military or civil, who facilitate the war can be considered legitimate military target. So saying that they could target those officials inside of Ukraine as well. Now, Medvedev on Twitter loves going off against things like this. It can be quite entertaining. Now, with some countries backing Ukraine to strike within Russia and others who are clearly against it, but what is known about all this is all the countries are not in support of their vehicles or weapons being used outside of Ukrainian territory. And we've spoken a lot about this, that this is absolutely crippling some of the efforts, especially for upcoming offensives, because unless, say, things like F-16s are purely going to be used in defensive measures against missiles or maybe some systems inside the borders, basically going to be used as an expensive air defense system, and it will not help tip the scales at all unless it can target and disrupt things inside Russian territory. As we've spoken about with closing the skies, Seed and deed missions from aircraft cannot be done without crossing aircraft into Russia. And this was where the hopeful of close the skies above Ukraine could not happen, because Western aircraft would have had to cross into Ukraine, fire missiles or fly themselves within the Russian Federation, and that would not end well for anyone. Continuing on speaking of involvement of other nations, Switzerland is against copping a lot of criticism as the National Council of the lower house of the Swiss Parliament has voted against an amendment that would allow the re-export of Swiss-made weaponry to third-party countries. So basically selling weapons to an intermediary country and then them selling them then onto Ukraine, creating a bit of a loophole around Switzerland's long-term neutrality policy. And we've seen other countries do this who don't want to be seen directly giving weapons, but hey, we'll sell it to you and then you can do what you'd like with it, knowing full well it's going then into Ukraine. Now, the Swiss info paper writes this could essentially block the purchase of Swiss Leopard tanks to transfer to Ukraine, as well as much needed ammo for the Swiss-made ammunition for the German Gepard anti-aircraft system to Kiev. Legends, that's me for today. I'm sorry if I'm talking a bit low. I'm just trying to protect my voice a little bit because it's no good at all. But look after yourselves. I'll speak to you soon. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Ground News, for sponsoring this video. Cheers.